Thinking positive thoughts is not enough to fuel your well-being. That's because you are an emotional being at your core. Hi, I'm Josephine Tite, founder of Positivity Center and a well-being consultant. Join me in conversation with friends who are willing to be vulnerable and share how they lean into their emotional center. Stop pouring from an empty cup, my friends, and instead lean in and learn to trust your heart. Welcome to Wellbeing That Works version 2.0, a heart-based approach.
Sounds perfect.
But hello and welcome. It's been a long time since I posted a show, but I'm looking forward to posting this one because it'll be the first of, a new kind of sense of what we're talking about. And we're really wanting to talk about what it means to lead from the heart. And so I'm so happy to be joined here by my guest, Dr. Brookfield. And I just would love you to just say hello, introduce yourself, and then we'll just talk about what your heart's saying in your life and in what you do for work.
Sure. Yeah. I'm Caroline. My doctor, everyone's just like, what kind of doctor? Are you a real doctor? So
Are we all real doctors?
I think they mean like a human physician and not like a chiropractor or naturopath usually, but I am a veterinarian. So I've been a vet for 25 years and had always, loved animals, and I was on this fast track to being a vet. And I remember hitting this kind of obstacle in high school where I really loved performance and drama and photography. And I felt like, oh, well, I have to pick art or science. And I chose to go onto veterinary medicine, which was a great choice for me. But I always felt like something was kind of missing. Like when I started going into vet school and then my first few years out of practice, you're like 100% into your career. You don't really have time for anything else. And then I was kind of like, there's something missing. And I thought it was my job. So I don't know if anybody else can relate, but I try a different job and that would be a bit better. But, it also helps that I found out I have ADHD as an adult. But it wasn't until I started reconnecting with my creativity. I started doing some stand-up comedy. I had a job with a pet food company where I did a lot of speaking, which I really loved, and it created the presentations. So that led me to where I am now, which is a public speaker, keynote speaker, do workshops on helping, especially people who think they're not creative because they're not artistic, engage with their own unique everyday creativity and all of the plethora of benefits, that come with it, like well-being and happiness and problem solving, which is how we connected.
Yeah, I know. And actually it was through a mutual friend. And so it's always, I love getting introduced to somebody who knows somebody that I know. And then you get introduced as an awesome human and everything just is, hunky dory.
Exactly. We all have a little bit of Kevin Bacon in us, I guess, right? So.
Right. And you were saying like being creative without feeling like you're creative. That is something I have found too, just in sort of the educational parts of my role and what I've done. I used to teach a continuing ed at the university, and I would get people to do this thing where they had to kind of put some artistic flair to what they were doing. I got them to basically create a collage of their strengths, right? And in a creative way, whatever it was that they chose to use, colors or cutouts or yarn or whatever it was. And we had to talk about this creativity thing that you bring up, because it's like, well, I don't know how to paint, but why do you assume that just, painting is the way of being creative? Like, so tell me how your definition of creativity has been defined and redefined perhaps, and how you communicate that to other people to help them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a barrier for people. I feel like we need a different word. Like in the business world, when we talk about creativity, a lot of consultants and management consultants, they won't even call it creativity. They call it thinking differently. And people talk about design thinking because it's a lot less chaotic or threatening, I think, than creativity, which seems so unstructured and threatening to, a sense of control.
Well, your book's called The Reluctant Creative. So does that, how does that help you define creativity for you?
Yeah, I mean, the reason I picked The Reluctant Creative was as trying to articulate this sense that we are all creative. We all do creative things. Even if you say you're not creative, it's just like you said, your definition is wrong. And most people love creativity. 80% of people who do something creative, and it doesn't have to be artistic, say they enjoy it, even if it's bad. And so that's why on the cover is this really badly decorated sugar cookie. I think my cover designer was like, what do you want on your cover? Because I wanted something that people could relate to. Like you said, like, I can't paint.
Yeah.
But, that's still creative, making
I just won't. I think that's the thing. Like, if you feel like you can't, sometimes you just don't. You don't even attempt it.
Mhm.
And I'm like, what does that rob you of? Like, oh my gosh, think about the heart in that instance. Like, you know,
Yeah, and the biggest barrier for people to do any type of creativity, whether it's artistic or not, is usually the judgment. People talk about how kindergartners are so creative, and they are creative in one area, like divergent thinking, but they're not often creative in the sense that they can make an innovation because they don't have the experience yet. But they're clueless about judgment. They just do it and they don't worry about failure. And I think, especially for people in more kind of left-brained or scientific or really rigid like banking or finance type of roles, they are built a career because they've been good at something and they've forgotten how to fail, and it holds people back, it holds companies back, it stops us from thinking of new solutions. And so I think that's a really big barrier for a lot of people as well.
yeah. How does being creative, this is just a question that might catch you totally off. You might have an answer, you might not. But how do you think creativity or being creative helps your heart be expressive?
Well, we think about being creative, you're sharing something about yourself with the world instead of sharing what people expect you to share, right? So you are expressing something that's uniquely you, which can leave you feeling very vulnerable.
Mhm.
And you're also expressing, usually with creativity, whether it's adding a dash of hot sauce to a meal or choosing an outfit, you're setting yourself up for, you're facing uncertainty. Even if you're doing a traditional like painting,
Yeah.
nobody knows really what the painting's going to look like, and you don't until it's done. So in every creative act, small or big, you're facing this idea of, I'm not sure how things are going to turn out. And if
Mhm.
you're in a career where it's more cause and effect, that's a new experience, because you're like, well, if I know that I put $10 in and my interest rate is 5%, I'm going to get, I don't even, but whatever that is, right? Like it's more linear. But, creativity is about stepping into this uncertainty and then knowing that there's a chance you're going to fail. It's not going to turn out. And then really that takes you to resilience, because resilience is doing something and failing and getting up and doing something else, right? So I always talk about creativity as like a boot camp for facing uncertainty, which we need desperately, and resilience, really.
Okay, so I got to share this. I don't know if you know, but I'm fresh back from Italy.
Oh, I didn't
And
know.
yeah, okay. And so here's the thing that I felt that there was this element of creativity of me expressing my heart through another language, because I don't, Italy's not my, native first language. And so, yes, I have a good understanding and yeah, I can speak it pretty good,
Oh,
but I don't know how to express myself in Italian the way I do in English.
yes.
And so literally, if I reflect back on some conversations, I would have to stop and think, I'm like, how do I want to express myself right now? Am I going to use the right words to express how I feel or what I want to say? And I had to let go of the judgment on myself. Like, I found the first couple days, I was like, I didn't know if I was saying it right. And I was so caught up in, like, if I had the right article or right conjugation of the verb or whatever. And then I had to let go of that and just let it go. And as soon as I could let go of judging which words I was using or how I was conjugating a verb or whatever, I was able to actually just allow my heart to express. And so it's so interesting. I never really ever thought of how language and words are also a form of creativity until
Mhm.
I thought about it in terms of like what it might be like, because I was basically in another language. It wasn't in my comfort spot, right? I had to be resilient.
Well,
Oh.
and you probably had to be a creative way to find the right words. Like,
Mhm.
I remember when I lived in Quebec, when I was in first year university, and I had taken French immersion, but I was quite rusty on my French. And I was trying to talk about a carpool with someone, and I was like, "Un piscine d'auto," and they were like,
When you
"What?" What is it? Like you're trying to think of creative ways to express yourself. And you're right. I felt like that too. Like you're a different person in another language because you can't make jokes the same way, your personality. So it is very difficult. So you have to be creative in the way you express yourself, but also knowing that your creativity is challenged and also amplified at the same time in some ways, I think.
Yeah, and I'm really just reflecting. For me, I think my reflection right now is that letting go of the self-judgment, especially,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, because if I think about just, allowing my heart to guide my life, to be a part of my leadership, having that heart-based approach to life and love and leadership in general, it's just like, okay, I got to learn to just let my heart do what it can,
And did you find that you were more connected to the people you were talking to or not? Or like, did you find a difference in your connection when you changed?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Cause you just, it's true. If I reflect back to some of the first couple of days and some of the conversations, I was just like, oh, but then after, when I just let go of that, yeah, just conversation just became more fluid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. And then people would also start to notice that you were speaking very well. And then they would comment on that. And then you're like, oh, I can speak pretty good. And it just kind of, little pat.
Oh, that's great.
Right. So it just adds, yeah, to that confidence, and that just, yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, maybe let's talk a little bit about heart-based leadership, and just, I wanted to ask you what you thought leadership was. Like, what is it for you? How would you define leadership?
Well, I guess leadership is defined to me, by first of all, living in alignment with your values and being, and having high integrity. I think that's important, both treating people with respect and honesty, but also being true to what you guys you. So making sure that you're living in what you hold is important in the world. And then I think a lot of it is about collaboration, listening, and whether you're a leader of people or a leader for yourself, just trying to take small chances to connect with people and help people along on a journey that has
Yeah.
a destination really in the end, but not compromising your values and your ethics in the meantime. I think
Yeah.
that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. And that can be some, when you reflect on that, simply, it seems so easy. Um, have you been challenged to live your values, to live in alignment with your values? Or are there times that come to mind when I ask you that?
I'm sure there have been. I think for me, a lot of it is, I have a I like adventure and I like to do different things. And sometimes the reality of life is that you have to pick the kids up from school. And so that can be a challenge for me, managing my expectations around, what life should look like. And maybe this is a struggle for other people, like what I want my life to look like, what I think I want my life to look like, and what it really should look like for my best potential and happiness. Three totally different things.
Yeah.
So I think it's all living in your values, but also knowing what that actually means. Like, does that mean I go on vacation once a year, or does that mean that I go hiking like once a month? Like you always want more of that thing, right? So that can be a struggle for me, is living in my values, like balancing all the things, I think. Was it the Facebook gal or someone talked about the 7 things? I think it was Mark Zuckerberg's wife, and she wrote a book, and it was like, you can have 6 things, but not all at once. So I think that's the challenge, is like knowing when you're pausing versus compromising. I think it's different.
Oh, that's a good indicator for sure. Yeah. Pausing. Because, yeah,
Why, what do you think? What do you think it is? What's
well,
leadership to you?
for me, oh gosh. Yeah.
Tables have turned.
Tables have turned. Yeah. I was like, I've done so much writing on like what I feel a heart-based approach is. And like, for me, it's not like a new thing at all. It's really just, for me, it's a revival of, that one kind of intuitive, like, make sense of that part of you that you kind of stop trusting, but it's there, and you should just connect with it a little bit more. If it makes sense to describe it that way, it's just trusting your intuition, right?
Mm-hmm.
That could be a word you could use to describe what a heart-based approach is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not any kind of new way of doing things, but I just feel like in our life right now, in our lives, in society, it's so much about science and, the mind and the data. And I get it. And it's a part of life, and it's an essential part of life. And in that mix is also the heart and the trust and the relationship and the connection. And that is missing. It's so missing, that I feel like we need a trajectory if you call swing, to start to lead with our heart more,
Mhm.
and in hopes that we can kind of balance that out. And
Mhm.
so that's why I'm here, because I just want to be like, we got to trust our hearts more. We got to lead with our hearts more to get back to that balance. And so I do believe that it won't be like this forever, where I'm just like, do it with your heart and all your heart and go with the heart, like lead with your heart. There's songs about this stuff,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's this, the heart is a part of life. Your spirit is a part of you as a human being. And you have to make sure that it's part of the equation in terms of how you choose to show up to live your life for yourself and for others.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's for me, that's what it is. Kind of, I got to find some more simpler words to describe it.
Yeah.
But
Well, a
yeah,
simple thing it's hard to describe something so complex. And I agree. I think for me, heart-based is more people-centric versus, because what I struggle with, because, I kind of stand on the precipice between like the art and science. I think both are important. I think there's value in intuition, but also what we know from a scientific perspective, like I'm listening to audiobook right now called Range. I think it's David Epstein, and it's fascinating. And in it, he talks about these ideas of kind and wicked learning environments. And a kind learning environment is like chess or golf, where you do something over and over again, you get instant feedback. It's pretty simple. You'll get better. But then the wicked environments is what most of us are living in. Like, you have a company and they do an advertising campaign, their profits go up, they hire a CEO, and then the profits crash. You'd be like, well, a CEO, but there's too many factors to make that judgment. But we all think we're in a kind learning environment. So we think we can assess the inputs. So I agree with you in many ways about the intuition, but my caution, and this goes back to creativity, we have so many outdated operating systems, like this idea of like we're still making decisions based on living in caves and like capturing, having a simple life where we just have to like hunt something. And then that the fear of judgment, like the fear of criticism and judgment is historical. It's like we feel it like physical pain, because if we were excluded from our tribe when we were building communities, we would have died. So now, like, we don't want to do something because we don't want people to judge us, but really it's so. That's what I struggle with, this idea of intuition and going with your gut versus sometimes our gut is like way off because we're still working on these instincts that have not kept pace with the rate of change in our world. So how do you balance those two ideas?
Yeah, that's just I love having these kind of discussions with you, because it's not like I've always been standing firm in the idea that there's never a one size fits all. So there's not like this 100% truth that everyone has to follow. And at the same time, if I decide that I'm going to say, yeah, okay, well, we could sort of lead with our hearts, but not really all the time, then what am I saying?
Well, you're
So,
saying it's complex. You're saying it's a wicked learning environment and that it's complicated.
and it is. And so I guess I need to be there to say, for those of you who need help with this area of your life, or for those of you who want to learn more about this part of who you are, then I can help you, right? I can help you find that balance, because in honest reality, I've had many conversations with people about the extremes, right? Like,
Yeah.
way over here, and it's just so when you get into those areas, someone's got to stand for those areas in order for there to be a middle, right? For
Right.
someone
Because
to
the
be able
people
to,
who are looking for that help are probably way, like they need a little bit. They're never going to get too far over to the other way.
yeah, and you might be somebody who's like, yeah, I know my intuition's maybe not taking me the best place right now, right? But not everybody can. That is still leading from the heart.
Yeah. And that comes
I'm
back to
not
what
saying that the heart is always right.
right. No,
Right,
and
just
that
like the
actually
mind
comes
is not
back.
always right.
No.
It is, but it has a voice, and the voice needs to be seen, heard, and validated, just like the voice of the mind needs to be seen, heard, and validated. So like you're saying, science is important, and so is, like, even in science, the quantitative data is important and the qualitative data is important, and there's a place for both. Someone still has to do the qualitative data to make
Yeah.
it get out there, for it to get out there. And so, yeah, that's what heart-based leadership is. It's that qualitative side of you, from a
Well, and
science.
I think, there's certain ways you can merge both. Like when you have an intuitive thought, you know, there's the famous Thinking Fast and Slow book. Like, you have an intuitive thought, then, this is what they talk about, wicked learning environments. Like, sit down and ask yourself, like, what am I missing? And that's actually blends well back into creativity, because one of my kind of 5 habits is facing ambiguity. And what we tend to do when we're faced with ambiguity is we react. We think it's our intuition, and we do what we've done in the past because it's always worked and it's helped us survive as a species. So what we need to do to both, I guess, validate or assess our intuitive response is to be more comfortable in that place of ambiguity, and just be able to take the time to say, okay, oh, this is what I want to do. It's like that email you send at midnight. Like, maybe you don't send it at midnight. Maybe you write it and send it the next day, because you have to sit with it and think, okay, what am I missing? Why? And one of the things about biases, which they say, is if you find yourself having a very strong or negative reaction to something like immediately, that's often a bias. It's not necessarily intuition, it's a bias. So how do you use creativity, and how do you amplify creativity by facing an ambiguous situation? Like, I don't know how my painting's going to turn out, or this dish is going to taste, and be okay with not knowing, and not like Googling the answer, and not, whatever the case. And then just sitting and making sure that that is truly your intuition, and not just an instinctive reaction, I think is what I would say.
And oftentimes emotional conversations come up when, you're talking, and, I know emotions don't technically live in the heart, they're in the brain, but, still, it's our feeling center, right? If you ask
creative license.
yeah, if you ask somebody what they feel, or if they feel love, they just kind of, I don't know, it's this hard thing. So yeah, it does involve a lot of conversations around emotions, but just because you're angry, and in your anger, you have a very maybe unkind response, urging you, that doesn't mean go do that.
Right.
So yeah, it's not always, like I say, right. But yeah, there is an emotional intelligence component to heart-based leadership for sure. You can't just, succumb to any emotion that you feel, because that's not necessarily kind to yourself or to others. But there's a learning there. Yeah, if you're willing to have those conversations, right? Like with yourself, which is kind of awkward. Like, sometimes I ask myself, like, okay, what are you feeling? And then I'd be like, okay, anger, like, what are you trying to tell me? And it's weird and it sounds odd probably, but yeah, I do have those conversations from time to time, because I'm trying to make sense of something that my heart, my mind, and my body's feeling, and I don't understand why. Yeah. So crazy stuff. But yeah, I love how, I think I got to work on the intuition word, because the word intuition, like when you use the word intuition, it makes me think of just like automatic reflex response, right?
Yeah, maybe I'm using it wrong. Well, I think I feel like people say, my intuition tells me I should do this.
And then they just, right? Automatic response.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not talking about an automatic response, but.
Well, even if it's not automatic, like, I don't know. Yeah, it's something I have to sit with. Maybe it's like creativity. We need better words.
Right. And we have to redefine things like time and time and time again.
Because they do. I mean, I'm not discounting intuition at all, because, they say that there's a reason. How do you sit in that moment of intuition and assess it for like, what is this? Is this, like you said, is this, my intuition is telling me this, but really I'm feeling angry. And I know that when I'm feeling angry, it's probably not my intuition. It's probably something else. So I think like a lot of self-reflection is really helpful. One of the things, when I see a therapist, and she is very big on like physical feelings. So she's like, where do you feel at? What happens in your body? And there's so much that happens with the physical sensations as well. So that's something I'm working on that helps me with my intuition, is like, what's my body doing and where am I feeling this? And then that helps me kind of sit with it for a minute and find out what is actually happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think that in your work, you are you doing some of this stuff with people and for people?
With the body stuff?
Just
kind of stuff?
like, just, we're talking about this way of thinking about leadership. Does it combine with what you're doing in your work?
Yeah, I think we're at a line where the crossroads are most obvious is my work with ambiguity, and helping people understand the effect of ambiguity on the way they learn and make decisions, and how creativity can help, and why it's important to build a practice of being more tolerant of ambiguity if you want to create new solutions and look at things in a different way. Because if you have an unconscious, most of us do have an unconscious negative reaction to ambiguity and uncertainty, and we want to resolve it at all costs very quickly, usually with the same thing we've always done. So if you're not conscious of that feeling, and that's where I do talk a little bit about, when I feel uncertain, it's the same physical sensations, whether I'm at the top of a double black ski run or whether I'm going to pick up the phone to make an uncomfortable phone call to a client about their pet, or whether it's hopping on a podcast or something, I have the same physical sensations. And so I help people try to, with exercises, identify those sensations, because I don't have any data, but I feel like if we can identify those sensations and we can identify what does ambiguity and uncertainty feel like to me, then you can go, oh, I'm feeling uncertain. Okay, this is not the time to make a decision. Like, I need to start collecting evidence. I need to start looking. I need to sit on this or seek counsel or whatever. So I think self-awareness, which is kind of what you're talking about in a lot of ways, is like the key to a lot of this, is knowing, why you're responding to something, and knowing that it's not necessarily like the right thing. It could just be your body trying to discharge that discomfort of uncertainty as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Would you be willing to share one of your tools that you usually help your clients with?
Well, one of the things I do is actually not my exercise. It's Kelsey Ramsden, who wrote a book called Success Hangover. And she used to be my coach many years ago, and she's a fantastic human being. And she does this exercise called, I forget what she calls it. I call it the uncomfortable or unusual introduction. And I get groups of people to introduce themselves, but they're not allowed to use any of the stuff they normally use. So they can't say where they live or who they are, like what they do for a living, or what they like to, their hobbies. So they have to say, like, an example would be like, I'm Caroline. I'm a lifelong learner who deeply values integrity and connection. And so it generally, like, often people say it's not uncomfortable, but it is different. Like it does challenge them with some ambiguity, like, oh, I've never done this before and it's uncomfortable. So I try to use that exercise to help people learn the sensations of ambiguity and realize that when we try to do something a bit different, that it does feel awkward.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It's so good. One day I want to have like a social gathering where we're not allowed to talk about our kids or what we do for work.
Yes. Yeah. You know what's great for that? I went backpacking for a year and a half in my 20s. And you could always pick out the people who were new on so I went thinking I was doing this intrepid thing. I was, flew to Asia solo, and basically flew into Thailand and overlanded to Singapore, and then flew to Indonesia, and then Australia, New Zealand. It was gone for about a year and a half. But you could always tell the people who had, and I got there and there was like thousands of other people doing the exact same thing I was doing. It really wasn't that exciting, but you could always tell the people who had just started, because they'd be like, hi, I'm Caroline. I'm from Calgary. Have you been to like the temple yet? It's really good. I recommend you go there. And then you would laugh because they'd be going on about these adventures, which they were excited about. It wasn't a judgment. But then like one guy, they'd be like, have you been? And then like the person sitting eating that like for the last half an hour hasn't said anything yet. Like, yeah, I was a monk there for 2 years, like, but the people who had been traveling for a while got so tired of the small talk. Like there were so many deep conversations I had with people. Never knew their name, never knew where they were from, because you got tired of doing like, I'm from Calgary. Where are you going? Where have you been? Did you eat the mango special? Like it just got really deep really quickly. And so that was really interesting, kind of what you were talking about is experience.
Well, and that's so cool, because I would describe myself as that kind of person that I can do small talk, but I don't love small talk. I don't enjoy it. I don't feel like I'm giving anything to anyone, and they're not filling me either. I love going deep and having just cool conversations about different stuff.
Go find a hostel in the Cameron Highlands in Malaysia, and you'll probably find it.
Okay, I gotta ask you one last question.
Okay.
What is a world you want to live in?
I can't answer that question. I think what world I want to live in is where people feel confident to express themselves in a way that's respectful to others, but also know that by sharing their unique, like getting over this idea that we're going to die if we share ourselves, because we need that. We need everybody's unique perspective, and we need people to be sharing their unique their unique experience to have creative solutions. So world I like to live in is where people treat each other with respect and allow everybody to participate in a way that looks meaningful to them. And I think the world will just be a better place because of that.
Absolutely. I hands down high-fiving you on that one for sure. It's true. My always wish was for there to be more empathy and compassion between people. And I still live that dream and hope to create something that lives out that dream for.
I think that the fear of judgment ties into that, because why are people unempathetic and not kind? Because they feel that they have to live up to some artificial standard themselves, and they're projecting that to everybody else. Where if that person were to lighten up a little bit and realize that they're not going to be judged if they don't show up exactly perfect or the way that people expect them to, like, what does a leader look like anyway, right? You don't, I think it's all comes down to this like personal fear of judgment and criticism, and it just kind of spirals.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I just have to unspiral myself from giving the wrong answer to the question, because otherwise I could sit in there and go, oh, you really screwed up, Josephine,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But like, there is that element of, loving yourself and others through all the imperfections, because they just exist. They just are.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, wonderful to chat with you. Thanks again for being so kind and resilient. And look forward to keeping in touch for sure.
Thank you so much, Josephine. So it was fun.
Yeah, for sure.